Welcome to period end processing for Sage 100. This short video will review the mechanics of running the period end processing functions within Sage 100. This video is more about how to process period end rather than why. Most accountants like to follow a strict month-end processing cycle. This video is not about what to reconcile as part of period end processing. That is a separate and longer discussion for sure. We have a 45-minute recorded webinar on that specific topic. Reach out to our support team at websupport@munjowhite.com for the link to that recorded webinar. Most modules are fairly identical in how to process period end. We'll walk through the steps for 3 of the modules as examples: General Ledger, Inventory, and Accounts Receivable. Whether you print reports or not is entirely up to you. Most of the analysis reports can be reprinted at any time. The only caveat is that you won't be able to run reports after the fact if data has been purged. Lastly, period end processing should be done when no one is in the system. Because of the interconnectivity of all the modules, you usually need exclusive access to all data files in order to be able to run the period end processing steps. Why run period end? The 2 main reasons are to prevent users from posting to prior periods and also to ensure data integrity and a little bit of data purging. When you run period end, the period number advances in many analysis reports, meaning that the report selection will default to period 3 instead of period 2, for example. One of the more obvious examples of this is in the transaction screen in Inventory Inquiry, where the search window defaults to the current inventory period. As mentioned earlier, you can run all period end reports from the standard reports menu at any time. The only time this may not be available for some reports is if data has been purged. For example, if you retain only 60 days of paid AP invoices, that's an AP option setting, then for sure you couldn't run the AP trial balance report for 6 months ago, as some of that data would have already been purged. We do see clients ignoring period end processing. Although there is nothing that says it must be done, you'll keep your system humming along smoothly if you do the period end processing functions on a regular basis. When should you run period end processing? Well, that's entirely up to you. If your primary reason for doing period end is to prevent users from backdating transactions, then as soon as you've determined that the period is done, you should run period end to prevent backdating. Typically, we see modules closed in the following order, although we do see many companies processing all of the period end processing functions for all the modules from start to finish all at once. The order of closing presented here is more for logic rather than system function. Typically, you finish invoicing your customers at month end first, therefore close that module first. Then close the related AR module, as that is probably the next thing that you finished, having run your statements. Purchase orders close next after you've completed your receipt of invoices for the month. AP is next. You might have some inventory adjustments to process that are not part of sales order or purchase order. Close that one next. Finally, close the General Ledger module after you have presented your statements to the owners, management, bankers, etc. Once you have reported your results, you don't want them to change inadvertently. Closing the GL periods will prevent posting to a period after results have been reported. Sometimes period end processing can take time. We've seen some users try to bypass the system design period end processing menu and simply change the current period in the module's option screen. Avoid doing this. Although that might help set the default period number when you run reports or on certain screens, you are bypassing the system design functions that need to be run. So we strongly recommend that you do not simply change the period number in the option screen in order to say the period end is done. So, the key steps in period end processing. From the period end processing menu, access the list of reports in the period end report selection menu. I typically do not print any reports at period end, as I've already run any reports that I need for balancing purposes before I get to that time when I want to close the period end in Sage. If you do choose to print reports as part of your period end processing, be sure the Paperless Office is configured properly and these reports are generated in PDF format automatically and retrievable from the period end report viewer within Paperless Office. After selecting or choosing not to select reports for period end, go to the task Period End Processing. Check the period number of what you are closing to make sure that you are in fact closing the correct period. If you have a non-calendar year end, and if your inventory options are configured to report this way, the period number may be a calendar period, not a fiscal period, so be mindful of that too. Let's do a quick demo of closing the general ledger. From the period end menu in GL, let's go to period end report selection. Notice that there are no reports selected for printing, and that's okay because I've already printed all of my reports. When I go into period end processing, you'll notice that the print period end reports is grayed out. That's because there are no reports selected for printing. When I go ahead and click on proceed, it might give me a warning that I need to print allocations or I haven't done so already. Do I want to continue without doing that? Yes, I do. It's reminding me that it's going to change period 5 to period 6. Do I want to complete period end processing? Yes, I do. And that's it. No time at all. Next, let's run through period end for inventory. Under the period end menu, I'm going to go into period end report selection. Notice that I have 2 reports already selected, and you can also choose a different report setting if you want a period end report to be different than the standard report setting. When I go to period end processing, I see that it's going to close period 5, in this case May 31st, 2020, and I've actually changed my mind. I don't want to print period end report, so I'm just going to remove the checkbox at this time and go ahead and hit proceed. It'll give me a message saying that period 5 ending May is going to be changed to period 6 ending June. Do I want to complete period end processing? Yes, I do. That's it for period end. Other modules are similar to GL and to inventory. Let's look at one more, accounts receivable. Before we go to period end processing, let's check the period in accounts receivable options. You'll notice here that it shows that the current period is period 5. When I go into my period end report selection, you can see that I have 2 reports that I want to print. One is the trial balance report, the other is the aged invoice report. Now, when I go to period end processing, I do want to print those 2 reports, so I'm going to go ahead and click on proceed. Even though I have a printer listed down here, I know the paperless office is going to take over and is going to generate these 2 reports in PDF format. I'm going to go ahead and click on print. And then I'm going to get a confirmation message saying that period end is now going to be updated to period 6. Once that's completed, if we run over to the Paperless Office module and go into my period end report viewer, I'm going to go ahead and click on refresh, and you can see there are the 2 PDFs that I just created for my period end reports. That's it for period end processing. So, some final words of caution. If you've never done period end processing before, you may want to check the individual module's option screen to make sure that you know what data might be purged, if any. For example, both accounts receivable and accounts payable have a setting for number of days to retain paid invoices. Purchase order has a setting for number of days to retain completed purchase orders. When closing a module, there can be no unposted transactions. For example, you might see a warning message when you try to run period end that the daily transaction register needs to be updated, or perhaps inventory transactions need to be updated. Finally, if you're not sure what you're doing, try running period end processing in a test company to see what will happen. If you purge data by mistake, there is no undo button. You'll have to restore from backup if you want to get that data back. There is nothing to fear from period end. Don't avoid it, just do it. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions on the content of this video or other Sage 100 questions, please reach out to our support team at websupport@munjowhite.com.